Okay, while the glue is drying on the fins and the motor mount, I want to look over the nose cone here. This is probably polypropylene, that's what it feels like. And it's also got two seams on it, so this was molded in two pieces. And this is going to be entirely up to your own personal aesthetic. Okay, so you can just ignore the seams here and paint it the way it is. It also has these two ridges here that don't show in the instructions, but you might want to keep them on there. I kind of like them as decoration, but you may also want to sand them off. Regardless of what you want to do with the seams and these things, I would highly recommend sanding the entire nose cone with 150 grit sandpaper, and then do some 220, maybe even some 320 later. But what that'll do is roughen up the surface here, not so that glue will attach, but so the paint will help adhere to that. Because the polyethylene and polypropylene don't retain paint very well. You can also get special primers that will stick better to this type of plastic and then allow your paint to adhere better that way. So I'm going to start off here actually with some 150 grit sandpaper. And first I'm just going to sand this seam here just to see if I can knock it down. Okay, so that takes down the high points, but we still have the valley of the seam there. You can sand that. You're going to end up doing a lot of sanding. I'm going to do the other seam here to see how it looks. Okay, and the same way, I've taken off the ridges, but there's still kind of the valley of the seam there. So I think I'm going to go ahead and sand this whole thing. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of these ridges up here too. So for that, I'm going to start out with some 100 grit sandpaper. Okay, that's taken down most of those ridges. I'm going to go back to the 150 grit sandpaper now and smooth that out. Okay, so that's got most of the ridges done. There's a little bit up here on the tip yet. Okay, so that's pretty much taken off the ridge. I can still barely see the circumferential ridges there. I'm going to go ahead and hit them some more. Alright, now I'm going to rinse that with just a little bit of alcohol on a tissue. You can use water as well. By using alcohol, it just dries faster. But this will just pick up the dust. Okay. So we do still have a bit of a seam here. Alright, but it's fairly flat, and I think most of that's going to disappear once we get a couple of coats of primer on it. I do still have a little bit of a ridge there. I'll go ahead and see if I can knock that down a bit more. Alright, so that looks pretty good. And now I'm going to move to some 220 grit. according to the instructions, they have you go ahead and assemble the shock cord and parachute to the nose cone and then paint it once everything's done. I'm going to take that a little out of order. I'm going to go ahead and take this and prime it now and then paint it, and then I'll hook up the recovery system to it. The primer is drying on my nose cone and my fillets are still drying on the rocket itself. So we'll take this time to assemble the parachute. So pull this out. Alright, these are our shroud lines, these are reinforcements. And the first thing we'll need to do is cut out the parachute. It just comes on a printed sheet. Alright, we can cut this out for 24 or 32 inches. I don't think we're going to need 32. Let me check the instructions quick. Alright, it's not going to tell us, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be 24. 32 is awfully big for a rocket this size. In fact, 24 is going to be awfully big for a rocket this size, but we'll go with it. It is very colorful. Alright, so we're going to start by simply cutting out the inner dotted line there. Okay, so next we're going to use these self-adhesive donuts to reinforce the parachute here. So we'll stick one of these at each one of the corners. And they do stick right away, so if you give them a little off center, just go with it. Now inside or on the edge of the parachute, add some additional information. So theoretically this should be 21 feet long, but we're supposed to cut it down to 16 feet if we're just using the 24-inch parachute. So first I just need to get this undone. There we go. Okay, and now I'm going to try and unravel this without getting too tangled up, and I don't think that's going to be possible. It appears to insist on tangling. We'll just tease this apart. So now I'm just going to take one end of this and my ruler, and I'm just going to wrap this around for 16 feet. Go, and we'll just, oops, come back here. And we'll just cut off that excess amount. It's a fair amount of string left, so you might want to put that in your junk box. Okay, and now we're going to cut this into 4 equal pieces. So the first thing I'm going to do is just cut it in half. Alright, so we've got both of the ends here. We'll line them up and then just pull this through till we get to the loop in the middle. Okay. And then we're going to do the same thing here. So now I'm going to take these two ends and match them back up over here. And we want to keep these as close as possible. Alright, and then once again we're going to find the middle. Okay, and those line up pretty good, so we'll just go ahead and cut those. Okay, and now one string will go across two adjacent corners here. And before we do that, we'll take a pencil and we're going to poke a hole through each one of the donuts here. And that's where our string will go. I have to use a hobby knife here. That's actually really resilient plastic. So just take one of the strings. Alright, run it through one of the holes in a corner and then tie 2 half hitches into it, or a double knot. And the main thing here is try and keep the free end of the knot there at about the same size all the way around so that we don't have major differences in the shroud line lengths. Alright, and then the other end will go through an adjacent corner. And do the same thing. Okay, and then they indicate you putting a little dab of glue on there to lock it in place. You can use white glue or wood glue, and you don't need a lot. We're just putting a little tiny dab on that knot to lock it in there. Okay, that's actually more than enough. And here, just a little bit of glue. Alright, and then we'll just continue all the way around the parachute, but I'm going to do that off camera. Now that my parachute shroud lines are all done, we can go ahead and get this ready for attachment. Now in the instructions it shows just tying this onto the nose cone. Alright, but if any of you have seen any of my videos, you know I don't like to do that. So I'm going to use a snap swivel here. And for the snap swivel, it has to be big enough for the snap portion to go around the nose cone eyelet, or alternatively, you can put a loop in the shock cord and attach it to that, which will allow you to use a smaller snap. Okay, and that's what I'm going to do with this one. Regardless, the attachment is the same. So the first thing I'm going to do is just gather up the loops here on one finger. And then I'm going to hold the parachute in the center of the sheet. And if we did all this right, all of those corners should be roughly at the same spot, and they are. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is holding on to that shroud line so they don't move. Okay, I'm going to take the loop down as small as I can make it, and I'm going to pass that through the swivel side of my snap swivel here. So all these should go through that loop. Alright, and this also might be a case where you need a bigger swivel if you can't get the shroud lines through. Alright, there we got it. Now I'm going to reform the loops, but all this time I'm still holding the shroud lines back here so they don't change relative length. Okay, so now I've got my loops here, the rest of the shroud lines here. and I'm going to push the snap swivel through that loop. Alright, and then I'm going to pull it down and then pull it taut. So that now we've got a nice knot going around the swivel side. I'm going to come back to the parachute, hold it in the middle again, and make sure that I haven't shifted the shroud lines. And it doesn't look like I have, they're still all in the same place. So once you know you've got this where it needs to be, then go ahead and take a little dab of white glue or wood glue and go ahead and put that on the knot here. And kind of work that into the knot a little bit, and this will keep that from shifting. Okay, so now the swivel is going to help keep the shroud lines from winding up if you're a little bit off balance. But more importantly, this allows you to change out the parachute. As like I mentioned, that this 24-inch chute seems rather large for a rocket that's not that big. And so if you've got a really windy day, you might want to put an 18-inch parachute on. And you can do that by simply unclipping one of them, taking that off, clipping the other one back on. And then if you have a calmer day, or your rocket's actually heavier than I think it's going to be, then you put the big one back on. Here I've added several coats of primer to the main part of the rocket, and I just need to do a little bit of sanding on here to take off the little fibers and such. And then this will be ready for a white top coat. I also have the nose cone here, and I'm in the process of painting it silver rather than black as shown in the instructions. And this has had a couple of coats. You can see some little imperfections here, so I'm going to give this a light sanding and probably at least 2 more coats of the silver. Here I've painted the rocket just a basic gloss white, and I'm going to let this dry overnight now, and when we come back we can start putting the decals on it. My paint is dry, and now it's time to apply the decals. This comes with a sheet of vinyl decals here, and the nice thing about vinyl decals is you can dip them in a little bit of soapy water, and this allows you to place and replace them fairly easily. So here I've got just a little basin of water that has a single drop of generic dishwashing detergent in it, and what we'll do is just dip each decal into that, and that kind of lubricates the decal so we can move it around. But once the water dries, it becomes permanent. Alright, now the instructions here just show us generically how to put these on. Okay, so for the placement, if you want to use the recommended decoration here, you'll need to refer to the illustration on the front of the instructions or on the packaging. Alright, so the most difficult one to put on is actually this round one here. Trying to get it centered. Okay, so it's going to go up nearly to the top of the body tube. Okay, so we're just going to get this wet. Now it should be centered on that fin. So I have to do a little line of sight things here. Okay, that looks pretty good. So now if we just gently place this down, I don't want to squeegee everything out yet, so I'm not sure about the placement quite yet. Okay, that looks pretty close. Alright, and then down at the bottom, we'll have these two decals here in between the fins. this is going to go here. And again, I'll leave these wet for a bit so I can reposition them as needed. And then we're going to put the other one at the other fin there. Okay, so this one's going to go here. Again, we'll try and center that. Press it down temporarily. Alright, then we need the two Zephyr Jr decals here. And those will fit in between the decals that we've just placed. Also just put that in place temporarily. Now we've got these two, and I believe those go on the launch lug side. Neither illustration gives me that, so I'm going to assume so. Just running into my launch lug. So what I'm going to do here is just snip that off just a little bit. Alright, we'll try repositioning it so it's right at the edge. Okay, just like that. And then we have the pointed decal here. Sight down, make sure those two are reasonably straight with each other. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and take some tissues here and start squeegeeing. We've got just a few left here. So I'm going to turn this around a bit. Okay, we still have a couple of little Apogee decals, the Zephyr decals here, and then the Apogee symbol. The Zephyr decals are going to go on the fins. Again, I'm just temporarily affixing them at first so I can move them easily if needed. Okay, and all of these decal placements are completely up to you. So if you want your Zephyr stickers sideways, or you want them all on one fin or on the body tube, it's your rocket. Do what you want to do with it. final decal here, which is another Apogee one. I'm going to put that up here, right in between these. Alright, and then once again, we're going to squeegee everything off here. Alright, now some people like to clear coat over decals. I found that with these vinyl decals that's not necessary at all. Although do be careful, these are actually inkjet printed, and some things will take the ink off. Alcohol is one of those, so if you're trying to clean up a spot with a little bit of rubbing alcohol or something, you can end up taking the color off, which I found out the hard way on my full-size Zephyr. Alright, I'm going to let that dry for just a couple of minutes while we move things around here, and then we'll do the final assembly. For the final touches on our Zephyr Jr., we now need to add the parachute here, and also tie in the nose cone. Alright, so for this I'm just going to take my shock cord, and I'm going to put in a double knot here, or 2 half hitches. Okay, and pull that down, and then I'm going to add just a little touch of super glue to that knot so it doesn't come unraveled. Okay, now the instructions indicate tying in the parachute directly to the eyelet there. I like to give myself a little bit of room, and so I'm going to tie mine into the shock cord. I'm just going to come down here about 20 centimeters or so, and then I'm going to tie a loop in the shock cord, just like that. Alright, so now when this hangs, the parachute's going to be up here toward the camera, and this will allow the nose cone to hang straight down instead of off at an angle, as is what often happens when the parachute is tied directly to the nose cone itself. Alright, so now I can take my parachute here, undo the snap swivel, and just pop that in there. Now if you didn't put in the snap swivel, you can tie your parachute to that loop as well, or you can tie it to the nose cone. Alright, and then we're just going to fold the parachute into a rough triangle here. And then I'm going to take my shroud lines approximately in the middle. I'm going to pull those up into my triangle here. And I'm going to fold the 2 sides over each other. And then fold this down and down again. Now if I'm actually preparing this for launch, I would want to put in some recovery wadding, or some dog barf, some cellulose insulation, before we put this all in. You could also consider adding a reusable Nomex parachute protector, but that does not come with the kit. Alright, and then we're just going to move everything into body tube. Alright, and we want to make sure we don't have anything in between the body tube and the nose cone there. Okay, so that all goes together there. And then lastly, we're going to screw on the engine retainer. Recall, this also does not come with the kit. You have to buy this separately. Okay, and with that, our Zephyr Jr. is ready to launch. I hope you enjoyed building this kit with me. Have a great launch and a safe recovery, and please stay tuned for more of my videos.